Ken Spriggs here with part 4 of my Bandai Millennium Falcon build, the 144 scale. This video goes a little bit longer than I normally do. It's about 37 minutes, I think. But I think it's worth it, so stick around to the end. I got a lot accomplished and some really nice effects with some different aftermarket parts that I used. Mainly focusing on the top gunner station. And I used some, not only some lights, but some photo etch. I used some other parts that I got in the mail as well. And then in the end, I'm going to have a nice little feature that I added for the gun as well. So everything turned out really, really good. So I'm really happy with the progress there. So let's go ahead and take a look. All right, so I got some goodies in the mail today. Some parts from Shapeways. They do 3D printing, and I got a set of several parts for the Millennium Falcon, some of which I really like and I'm going to use, and some that I might not. We'll see. The main one that I really like a lot is the gun turret window. They're very thin and very fragile, but I'll be able to definitely make them work. They have the right profile and they're very thin, and that's what I really want to see, because I'm doing the photo etch inside of the gun turret, the gunner station, and I want to be able to see it, so I don't want some clunky plastic part obscuring it. Here's the part that came with it, and unlike the Cockpit, they didn't give you a clear and a non-windowed version, so this is all you have. And even if you were to mask off those lines, you'd still have that blurry clear plastic through there, so I don't like that piece at all. I'm not going to use that for this kit. The photo etch, a little better, but it's in two parts and you have to glue it together, and it's kind of clunky in a way. It's thicker looking, so I don't like that as much. Definitely like the Shapeways, and that's the one I'm going to end up going with. I also got some of the Cockpit parts. I got a new actual Cockpit piece right here that comes with more realistic seats. The back seats, the front seats, they look a lot more realistic. The controls are about the same as far as the model version, but they are clear and they can be lit up. From what they say, there's a little slot there you can put a light, an LED up into there, so I'm not really worried about lighting those up, so that's not really an appeal to me. So we'll see. I like the seats that are better, but this part is a little more designed for the kit. The other one doesn't work quite as well, so we'll see. I might just cut these seats out and use the plastic for it. It also came with a replacement front cone, which is more accurate to the ship. And the windows are a little bigger, more defined. The inside is nice and smooth, and it's all one piece, so I kind of like that part of it. That if I want to put some windows in it, that's going to work better as well. The one that came with the kit comes in two pieces. It's a little harder to work with. It's a little more clunky. So I'll most likely go with the Shapeways one. I do like that as well. And this is designed to fit it, and it looks nice. And then the last part is the back cockpit wall. And this particular piece I'm not really that thrilled with, and I'm not going to use it. It's clear, but it doesn't have any kind of holes in it. It almost kind of looks like there is, but there are almost air bubbles in it. So it wouldn't be that great to light. So this piece I'm not really going to use, nor am I going to use the one from the kit. Solid plastic, also no holes. A lot of detail, but the one that I really like the most is the photo etch, and I'm going to go with that. It has quite a bit of holes in it, quite a bit of areas to light up, including those two horizontal lines that you can make the white light to. And I can paint this on the front and on the back. I can use some thin styrene, or I can use some clear Tamiya gels, or not gels, paints. I have the main colors: red, green, yellow, blue, and orange in clear. So I can put those over top of the little holes and let the light shine through it. So these are going to work really well. And in this video today, I'm focusing primarily on the gun turrets and using this piece here. So let's go ahead and see what we can do with this here. All right, so I'm working with the gunner stations, and oops, there. As I showed in the previous video, I want to use the photo etch, but what I'm going to try to do is adapt the initial kit part to be able to have the photo etch parts, at least the ones that are going to light up from behind. So I cut out some sections of this, cut out the back of it, and I cut out the two top side pieces, which are going to have these sections that light up. So in the photo etch, these are the ones that have the most lighting parts of it, the sections in there. There's a little bit on the ones that go on the sides, which I can cut a little hole out to match them up. So I hollowed out most of the internal detail, with the exception of the bottom that's going to house the chair. And this will make it a lot easier than trying to bend all these pieces, and then they're supposed to glue onto this little ring here and then fit into it. So that's a whole lot more tricky to do than if I just cut off these sections, and I already cut the one off right there, as you can see. Close up there. Yeah, so this one here was initially right there. So if I cut off each of these sections and I just glue them inside of this part after I sand down the detail, I can still light them from behind after I mask this whole piece off, and it'll be a lot easier to stick into the kit and a lot easier to work with. So all right, so let me work on that a little bit more, see if I can get those pieces inside of there, and come up with some cool detail for that. And here's my one of my completed gunner turrets. I think that turned out really awesome. That is really cool. As I showed earlier, I took the photo etch and I cut it out and put it in, and I cut up in big sections on the outside of this piece of the model that would let the light shine through. It was a bit tricky. I had to glue it in with some 5-minute epoxy, but I think that turned out amazing. Look at that. There's a little idea of what the lights are going to look like inside when I shine that through. So I'm really pleased with that. I think that's excellent. And I just put a little bit of the base gray on the back of it in the bottom, just the parts that are exposed. But that turned out amazing. That looks really good for the detail in there. That's really awesome. Look at that. All right, so that'll go on to, I'm going to put the gunner chair in and get that painted. I'm thinking about putting a figure in it, maybe Finn at the top, if I can get him to fit into the chair right. And of course I'll light this up from the outside. So yeah, so that really turned out great. I'm glad I took that route instead of trying to glue all that photo etch. The original photo etch wanted me to just get rid of this part and glue those together. That would have been a lot harder. So this was a bit tricky, but in the end it's a nice solid piece. It looks amazing. It's got really nice detail on it. Okay, so I got it masked off for the most part on the back. I have a little plastic tube in there, as you can see. And that's gonna just light up enough like that, have some glow in the back to give it some light. I don't want it to overpower the control lights. I glued on this brass ring. This is part of the photo etch set. So initially they wanted me to glue this onto just that inner metal part. It would replace the plastic kit part. But as I showed, I still use the kit part to give it some stability. So I had a few rough edges, and they were sort of showing through when I stuck it inside of the top piece. So I did glue that ring on, and I have some 5-minute epoxy drying around it. I will black mask that as well. And then the top part that we'll see, just a bit of it, I'm going to paint it some of that gray as well to match in with the rest of it. And other than one little seam, that little seam right up on this corner, I have to blacken that off a bit. I have some epoxy in there drying as well. Once that does, I'm going to put some black in there. Then I'll be ready to start lighting it. And for a lot of these little holes, I want to take some clear Tamiya paints. I have several of the colors like red and orange, all the basic colors. Red, orange, green, blue, and yellow. So I'm going to paint off certain sections of them, just dab it onto the hole so it kind of fills them but still can shine through. I don't want to do too much of it. Some of that already did do that with the paint, because these holes are so fine it's really hard to see, but you can see that center panel towards the top. A few of those are red already because the red clogged up the holes, and so it already did a little bit of that for me. Alright, and here's a bit of a test. All I did was tape an LED on the top of this white tube. It's going to be in the outside of it, giving just kind of a glow through there. And you can see it's a little brighter than it's going to end up being, but I just want to give you an idea. So even with the gun in place, you can see a lot of that detail on the walls. And then once I have the controls in there, as you can kind of see from the back lighting there, that'll be really cool. That's going to be pretty sweet. And then we'll have the gunner in there as well. But that Shapeways window worked out really well. The little cockpit, or the gunner station window. It's just the right size. It lets a lot go through. Still debating about whether or not to put some kind of clear plastic for a window. We'll see. But I can always leave it without it and see. But you can see all those controls in there, and all the detail is pretty awesome. Alright, so this is pretty much finished, other than putting the lights in. As you can see, I used a lot of the clears, red, green, yellow, blue, orange, to get those to light up. That's going to look pretty cool. So all be different colors. I have this little section in the back about the right size. I'm going to have to test it whenever the two are in. There's not much clearance, but there is enough. There's maybe about 1/4 of an inch, so they'll match up. So once I get this hole drilled out, I can make it so that they match up and they meet. I also I'm going to start on the gunner's chair, and I do have the little fin figure in there. He didn't fit very well at first, but you have to just kind of force his legs around this column, and then he sits right into the seat. So I didn't have to trim off anything, cut any of his legs off or anything. So I'm going to start getting this this gunner chair painted. He's not glued in place, so I'll take him out and paint him. He's going to be a little tricky to get painted, but I'll have him in there as well. So I completed the gunner's chair. I didn't really try to match any certain colors. I know it's a bit out of scale, or inaccurate, I guess I should say. But I used the base of gunmetal from Tamiya, and then I hard to get a focus on that. I painted the chair itself black, and I just put some silver highlights, aluminum actually, highlights on some of the handles, and a little bit of red on there, just to kind of let it stand out a bit. So it won't be the main focus of the gunner chair, or the gunner, but it's fine. All right, so let me go ahead and work on the fin figure. So I picked up a new brush today, very fine point, as you can see right there, to try to paint the fin figure. Super tiny little figure. Hard to even get a focus on it. So I'm going to start by painting his pants a Tamiya Field Blue, and then we'll work on his jacket and his face and hair. So it's going to be really tricky because he is so tiny. Alright, and here's my completed fin figure. Once again, it's really hard to get a focus. He's so tiny. A lot of his painting is just like the merest hints of color. So believe it or not, I used these 6 different colors here. There's another one too, which I don't have here. Field Blue for his pants. I used earth mainly for his jacket, and white for the shirt in the middle behind it. And then I used the NATO black for his shoes and his hair. His skin, I used a little bit more of the flat earth, and I put a little bit of white in there to lighten it up a bit, and well, actually some flesh, which is up here, to make it look more distinguished between his face and his hands and his jacket. And then I put just a little bit of highlights, very tiny highlights of yellow and red on his jacket, because they did have different colors on them. So I think he looks pretty good for the super tiny size that he is. Let's see if I can get closer. Yeah, I didn't even attempt to do anything in the way of a mouth or eyes or anything, so. But I think he looks good considering. There we go, that's a nice shot of him. So, especially for that super tiny scale. Alright, so let me get him into the chair and see how he looks in the gunner station. Alright, and there he is in the chair. And once again, if you just force his legs around that console there, he sits in there nicely. And actually he can get down a little bit more. Oh, I'll just leave him be. I'll get him in a second. But he doesn't even need to be glued in, because it's such a tight wedge that he's going to fit just fine. There we go. That's a nice picture of him. So, alright, so I might put a little flat coat on him, but let me get him inside the gunner station and see how that's going to look. Alright, and there he is inside the station. Looks pretty good. Once again, for that scale, it's really hard to get a lot of detail on him, but I think he'll be just fine. Same with that gunner chair. There we go. That's kind of a cool shot of him. Okay. Alright, so one more shot. I'll put him inside of the turret, and we'll take a look there as well. Alright, there we go. And keep in mind, this will be lit up with controls on the sides and the light in the back. So, like I said, a little bit of a flat coat on him to dull down some of that shine, but it's going to look pretty cool. And a lot of him won't be visible because of the gun in place. I do want to work on an idea possibly for the gun that I can put some kind of a hinge that it can move out. Because in the movie, the gun gets stuck in a forward position, as they call it, sticking straight up. Now, before any of you say anything, I do realize that he is not in the top turret. He's in the bottom one. And I watched the movie just to be sure, but I'm going to put him in the top because I don't want to be showing the bottom of the kit as much. I'm thinking about a really modest diorama, nothing major. maybe a couple of the new TIE fighters from The Force Awakens, but nothing major because I'm going to get that kit as well. You get the 2 TIE fighters. Just a flat base of the desert, nothing super major. But I don't want to show the bottom of the kit. I want to show the top of the kit. And I know there's a pivotal moment where they flip the ship over so he can take out the last TIE fighter. I understand all that. But a little bit of creative license here. I'm going to put him in the top. And so I want to be able to see that in the top. And that'll be lit up so you'll be able to see him as well. So I'm thinking about an idea where maybe the gun can flip up a bit and then move down. Just cut off the main part of it and put like a hinge in it possibly. Let me show you real quick on that. So here you go. The only piece on this kit, which is an amazing kit that I'm not thrilled with, is that the gun is stationary. It's just stuck on this piece right here. And when you put it in, it actually locks in to those 2 little grooves up there, so it doesn't even move side to side. So I could cut those out if I wanted to. And what I'm thinking about is severing this right at this joint, putting in some kind of pin mechanism so it can actually pivot up and down at least. I don't need it to go back and forth, but if I can just pull it out. Because otherwise it's going to be in the way of seeing him. Let me put that on there. So with that in place, it'll be lit up from behind, like I said, so he's not quite as visible because he's going to be in shadow. So even if I have a light from behind, not too terrible. And you can still see him in there. That's kind of cool. And that'll be sort of like what it is. So he'll still be somewhat visible. But I do like the idea that this gun will be able to pivot and you'll be able to pull it up to somewhat replicate that from the movie where the gun's stuck out of there. So, okay, great. So the pilot chair is all set. It's ready to go. I still am working on a couple of ideas for some light boxes to light those up. And that'll be the last of it. Once I get that done, then this top turret will be all completed. I still have to paint that gun, of course, and weather it. I started some chipping on the top there, and I'm going to weather this as well before I consider any kind of a glass in there. And I'm still not quite sold on that, but I did get some very thin styrene, clear styrene. And it's similar to the thin paper-like styrene that I use, which I might use for the light boxes, but it's clear. So it's very thin. And I started cutting out some circles and getting an idea of how to make that top turret. So we'll see. I do like the idea of having some form of glass in there, and this would be perfect for that. Okay. All right, well, let me get working on those light boxes, and we'll wrap up this video and get the top turret all done. All right. Okay, so I'm doing a little tricky work with an X-Acto knife. I want this top gun, quad gun, I'm sorry, to actually swivel. To be able to swivel up and down, that kind of thing. So it came in 2 pieces, which is helpful, but I really wish they would have made both of these pieces separate and have the little yoke there. Even if it was just something you click in place, I still could have adjusted it and drilled through it and put a little pin. So I'm going to do it myself. It's very delicate, and I'm just taking my time. Generally what I've done so far is just take the end of a X-Acto and keep poking it down through here. I got this back part done first, and just pressing it in until it finally dug through to the other side. So that whole back part of the cannon is free. It's not attached anymore, and I can clean that up once I get that loose. The hardest part is these 2 little yokes, two little arms here in the end. I don't want to chew them up too much, and I want to keep a solid piece enough that I could put a pin through it so it swivels. So what I'm doing now is just delicately, once again, it's really hard to show this, but, and just slowly notching and grooving right along here, and on this side as well, and just going on both sides, and then doing the rounded end and slowly grooving those out, and just being really cautious and careful with it. Okay, so what I did was I went ahead and got a pole saw. It's a little fine blade that has a little ridge on it, so you pull it and it cuts through plastic. I managed to gently cut through this, kept most of the U yoke. It's a little rough, but I'm going to sand it down, and then I can reinforce the inside of it with some styrene so it's stronger when I'm ready to glue the gun back in. So now I have the part of the gun that was in there loose, and I can clean that up a little bit. Just clean up the edges, smooth it out, and then when I put these two together, they'll be ready to go back inside the yoke that I clean up, and I'll be able to have a hinged mechanism. So I might use some very thin tubing, but I'll use something in order to go between these two guns, so when I stick it back into the smoothed out yoke, the gun will go back inside and it will pivot. Okay, and here is my build-up yoke again. I use some thin styrene, some flat styrene stock. I sanded down one edge of it to bevel it a bit and glued it in place. Did that on both sides so that they'd be more solid so they don't break. Because what I have to do now is drill a hole through them, very tiny little hole, and that's going to accommodate this very thin piece of brass. And then I have a brass tubing that fits into. That's going to go between the more solid gun part. So that'll go through the side there. And then secure the gun onto it. And at this point, it's pretty much the right shape. I might just adapt it a tiny bit more. It goes inside. Okay, probably sand it down just a little bit more. But it will stay in there and it will pivot up and down so I can move it around. Once I get that together, I'll be ready to start painting it. All right, so I was afraid to use a drill, but it just was a little too big, so I just took a needle, put some tape around it, and just poked it through onto some hard plastic until I can get a hole through that. And there is that rod going through the yoke. All right, so all I have to do now is get a hole drilled through the actual gun here, put some of this little tube through, and I'll be able to just stick that right through. Put a dab of glue in the end to keep it in place, and that should be all set, and I can start painting it. So I have that gun glued into place. It still needs to be painted, but I trimmed off the pins and I put some 5-minute epoxy on either end of it so that the gun can now be sitting in its normal position. And if I want to, I can raise it. Go all the way up. So what they refer to as the forward position. Maybe a little too forward. So, you know, if this were the bottom, and I know, thanks for reminding me, and Finn were on it, and Ray flipped the ship over, and he was just in the right position to blast the final TIE fighter. And plus, the main reason is so I can look down inside and see the detail that's going to be in that gunner station. So that'll be nice. And then when I don't want to see that or don't need to, I can just flip this right back down to its normal position. There we go. So that was a bit of a delicate work there, but it turned out nicely. All right. So I just need to get that gun painted, and that'll be complete as well. So let me go ahead and finish up the lighting on the cockpit, the gunner station, I'm sorry, and then this section will be done. All right, and here's a makeshift lighting tube for the back of the gunner station. It's just a thin styrene tube wrapped around it and just taped into place right now, and I have some lights illuminating the center of it, including that center tube. So that'll be made more permanent, but I just wanted to wrap up this video here and show you the lights inside of the cockpit, and I have everything all completed. So let me go ahead and bring that around here. All right, and there we go. Now the glow in the back is about right. I'm going to probably make it a little less bright, but you can see all the controls in there. You can see the little Finn figure in there as well. It's pretty cool. And of course that that turret gun is movable. I wish to raise it up. It doesn't really block a lot, so I don't see the need necessarily, but if I wanted to, I could bring it up and see inside there, so that looks pretty cool. You can see all the little control lights in there. That's a pretty cool shot. And that glow isn't as bright as it looks on the camera. The camera doesn't really do justice to it. It's actually pretty dim. It's just like a dim glow. So it illuminates the inside of it, but you can still see everything you want to see. That's pretty cool. And I just noticed it's kind of cool, this little red light that sort of shows right between the top of that gun there, which is neat. It's picking it up from that big bright light there from the controls. So all right, so that turned out really, really well. I really like that a lot. Let's see if I can show it in the dark here a little bit more. Yeah, so lots of detail, lots of little control lights in the cabin that glow in the back, and the movable quad gun at the top. So I think that turned out really, really well. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this video. This one's ready to go as soon as I finalize those lights and get the gun painted. All right, I will see you next week.